Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, and of course, our new and special co-host, Jenna. So today's episode is called No BS Manifesting Part 2, Stop Making It So Hard.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set. As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick moment and hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to get the inside info on this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationpodcast.com. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set.
Well, hello there, gang. How's everyone doing?
We're doing great.
Yeah. Hi, Jenna.
Look, we're on a roll.
Hi. I know. It's like, let's go.
Getting it, yeah.
We're recording. We're back at Illumination Podcast, and it's been so fun having Jenna here. And we thought it would be cool to bring everybody into how we actually met Jenna, because it's been how many years?
I don't remember.
7 years, maybe? It's 2024.
At least. Yeah.
2024. So
yeah, at least that.
The tie-in for us is the three of us, we have a very special human mentor, Kevin Hutto, who's sadly not on the planet anymore, and we miss him every single day. He's the one that certainly when I started to work with Kevin, Jenna was sort of his gatekeeper. Mm-hmm. I would say that's accurate. So I had to chat with Jenna a little bit. I'm like, I don't know who she is, but she's fun. And then as I remember, you just went back to Kevin. You're like, oh, Kisma's cool. We can work with her.
Yeah. I was like, I love Kisma. We got to get Kisma, because it was my first week or two. I just started working for Kevin.
What were you doing for him?
I have no idea. He just said
things.
So I found out, a few years after we met, that the reason he hired me just turned out to not be true at all. He had just watched some movie. I think it was like The Accountant or whichever one, where somebody is super hyper focused on solving some kind of problem. And he was like, I need someone like that on my team. And so he saw me at this event sending back my food because I have celiac, I can't have gluten. And so with that movie in his mind, he thought I was just being really, particular. So he was like, I got to talk to that girl. And so, we gave it a try, and then it just kind of evolved into something totally different. But it was really funny. I think every time Kevin introduced me, I had a different title. So there's probably people out there listening who think I am, 6 different people. It's just me.
And just for the world who never heard of Kevin Hutto, what did he do? He was behind the scenes, I feel like so many successful businesses and coaches.
He would describe himself as an evil genius. I would say he is the best marketer that nobody realizes they learned from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree.
Like a best kept secret.
Yeah. And
he liked it that way.
He loved it. He would always say, stop trying to change the world, because statistically you can't. And it sounds really pessimistic, but when you think about that, it really takes the pressure off. And that was, I guess, every single person I know who knows Kevin had one pivotal moment or one thing he said that changed their lives.
At least.
And of course I have a million, because I lived with them, but yeah, that was one of the things. Was like, he sat me down over like a basket of French fries, and he said, you can't change the world, but you can change your world,
and you can eat one fry at a time.
Yeah. And that's something that really, really stuck with me, is that you can change your world. And if you listen to part 1, that's something that we talked about, is like reverse engineering. And he would always say, like, I don't really know what Kismet does, but I know it works.
Yeah.
So
Coming from a guy like that, talk about a skeptic. Like
Yeah.
but he was a real genuine skeptic of, in a really positive and healthy way.
right.
Yeah.
You know, like engineer by trade, you know, he works the big, you know, financial firms and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's how we met. And that kind of like jump started my manifesting journey, honestly. And
I love that.
Kevin would hate that I said that. And he's hating that we're all saying he changed our lives. But
Yeah,
But he
he's
really
not liking
did.
that at all. But he did. He really did.
He
He was
did,
such
he
a
did.
phenomenal person. My memories of him are we're on the Zoom and he's sitting there smoking a cigar,
Maybe drinking a whiskey or
but
something.
there's all shadow on his face.
Yeah,
right?
he didn't care.
He's sitting, he's sitting outside and there's nothing, there's no sun on his face.
Or he's on his
He's just like
boat.
this shadowy figure, and he just could not care less that nobody can see him, that we can only see a silhouette. It's like Charlie's Angels, you could just see the shadowy person there. He was so great though. I mean, he influenced us in ways Illumination Academy would not be what it is by a long stretch without
or
Kevin.
the Blessed Crystal
Or
Company.
the Blessed Crystal
Oh, yeah,
Company.
that
The Blessed
was-
Crystal wouldn't even exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it's a fun.
And Mystic Sound Healing. I remember on that call too, he's like, oh, that's a thing. Like that's, like stick with that. That's a thing. So.
Yeah, definitely. And what's really interesting, so when we come back to this, stop making it so hard, everyone, is I think, look, Kevin had a ridiculous IQ. He blurted it out once on a call and we all kind of went, what?
Is that for real? Yeah.
Yeah, however, he had this knack for point A to point B. And he could also create something very, very intricate and complex, but you were always going from, I feel like, point A to point B. He kept it simple. He didn't make it hard. And he just showed up like, here's what I'm doing. Here's what we're going to do. He reminds me of Rick Rubin. Like now as
In a
I'm
way.
watching Rick Rubin, because
Yeah.
Rick Rubin will say, oh, I'm not starting and not stopping and not finishing things. I'm starting projects and then maybe the energy moves to another one and then it moves to another one. And I think that's a really great way to say like you don't finish things, but like you get sparked in different directions. And I think Kevin had that too. It's like he would pour everything in, get it going, and maybe then he didn't love it and he'd move on to the next thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it would be like, he would get these ideas and sometimes like we shut a couple down and, he shut a couple of my ideas down. We never got to do, clients every day on a boat, but he would have this idea and we would have the idea in the morning. He's doing his morning routine. He starts making his coffee. That's when I wake up. And by the time I sit down on my computer, he's like, here's what we're going to do. And the idea would start and we would spend the entire day doing all the steps to do it. And then by the end of the day, it was in motion.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
It's like a fail fast.
So it's the skeptic checklist of just not making it hard and keep moving to the next step.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everyone listen, whether you're a skeptic or you're completely woo, it's about taking what is right in front of you and keep moving to the next step and stay out of, I think looking at, okay, is this going to work? Like we have strategy, right? But staying out of the doubt and out of the worry.
Yeah. Well, and you're bringing up a really good point there too, of like starting with where you're at with what you have right now. That's a place where a lot of people way overcomplicate things because they're thinking about when I have this or when this happens,
Right.
then I can do that. And then they're 10 steps ahead, which is not always a bad thing, but can be definitely overcomplicating things. Or they're just in that constant waiting game of like, oh, it's almost time. Oh, it's almost there, and then I can. But working with what you have right now, I think that's one of the beauties of simplicity is like really looking at what you have and being like, all right, what can we do from right here?
Exactly. So when we come back to stop making it so hard, I think, and it's amazing that we're bringing Kevin Hutto to this podcast because
Would he be happy about that or would he be?
I don't know. I think he'd be secretly excited that we
Yeah.
were all talking about him saying really cool things.
He'd be touched.
But he did make it hard, did he?
No.
No.
And he had a way of clarifying things where, say, I would show up to a call and be like, okay, I want to do this, or how about this? And the first question he would ask is like, Kisma, why do you want to do that? So talk about a clarifying question, everyone, when you're looking at, I want to manifest, or I want to do this. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because if there isn't a why behind it, or if you don't have that clarity, chances are you're going to make it hard.
Right. Or if the why is, for lack of a better word, dumb.
Yeah.
The why is dumb.
Yeah,
Like,
dumb or convoluted.
Do you want to dance around on TikTok because everyone else is doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think it's fun and your followers are going to love it? Those are two wildly different whys.
And you can see the results are wildly different. There's nothing more cringe worthy than someone dancing on TikTok because everybody else is.
Yeah.
You just just to refer the last episode in energy, that's an energy.
Yes.
That's an energy.
That's
it's a vibe.
It's a
everybody.
vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can tell the people who are forcing it and the ones that aren't. And then it's always the ones that are having the best time that have the most comments, because there's people that are loving it. And then there are always going to be people that are mad that you're having fun.
Yeah.
Which is really, really funny
funny,
to
yeah.
think about. I've experienced that, kind of on both sides. But why are we here if not to have fun?
If not to have fun, yeah. Really enjoy our lives. Yeah.
That's one way to make it easy. So stop making it hard. Let's go with making it easy. And let's take that to an extra step of making it simple.
Yes.
Because that's what we really learned from our mentor is make it simple. Even in the most intricate sales funnel or ads campaign or whatever, what was the simple approach? And I can't help it, everyone, but going back to what is the intention, which also equates to energy behind it. If there's something, if you're starting something, you have a lot of worry, you have a lot of doubt, you're just like, there's no way this is going to work. It's going to be heavy and therefore it's going to be hard. When you start something with this clear, bright, possible energy, or just like, like Jenna said, I think this could be fun. You're going to have a lightness with it, and it's just going to be more clear and therefore more simple.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and simple actionable steps really help to build confidence.
They do.
It erodes confidence and opens the door wide open for doubt when you're constantly in your head trying to figure it out and think about it and like all the things. And but when you're taking simple, actionable steps, every step of the way, you're like, okay, cool, I can do that. I can do one more.
Your
I can do
brain
one more.
is very
And your
happy.
confidence, you build confidence as a result of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about that a lot. That's something I learned from Nick and Kisma is you don't have to necessarily know the whole picture, but if you are confident in your next step, that's what you need to do. So we're in California right now. I've lived here probably almost as long as I've known Kisma and Nick, but I'm not from here, and I knew nobody when I moved here. And actually the first time I moved here, it felt kind of like throwing darts at a board. I graduated college and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I started applying to jobs all over the country, and I said, whichever job that sounds cool and I'm just going to go there first. I drove out to California sight unseen and just kind of made it happen. Once I got to California and experienced it, it was a really, really great first job. It was super fun. I got to work with kids and teaching them nutrition and playing with them. It was great. But once I got there, I said, oh, this is California. And I started realizing things about my job that I liked, things that I didn't like. And that opened the door for me to go back to the East Coast and reset and say, okay, I'm going to move out to California, and next time it's going to be the right move.
Good one.
Yeah.
And that's when I met Kevin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, something that you bring up there, that's one of the ways that I see that people make it really hard is they want to create this massive, very specific vision about how they want it. And they believe that that's necessary for manifestation. I see this definitely more often in woo people where they're like, oh, I gotta see it, I gotta see it crystal clear and I gotta get it just right and all this stuff. And also at the same time, they're a little afraid of committing to the forever thing. So it leaves them in this limbo and also kind of pushes that vision out there somewhere else. And I think that just makes it so much harder and heavier because you feel like you're making this forever decision about how my life is going to be for the next 30 years or whatever. And you didn't even give yourself a chance to get started. When you talk about keeping it simple, it's like, just like Kisma, or just like we were talking about with Kevin and you, how you worked is start with where you are and what you have and what you can see. Hey, it'd be a little cooler if. It'd be really awesome if, I could start here and let it grow from there. Like, you're such a great example of that, Jenna. 'Cause you're like such a follow the vibe kind of person, right? And just kind of stepping into it and letting things that you never even knew were possible start to emerge for you and say like, oh, okay, yeah, more of that. Oh, a little bit less of that. Let's go in this direction. That to me is like keeping it simple.
Yeah, I think that was another shift for me, was that not every decision is going to be forever. And, not every decision is going to turn out how you planned it would.
If only, right?
Right. Like we talk about a lot of, positive things. Like I say yes to a lot of things because I love to just try them out. But there were a lot of times those yeses maybe should have been nos.
I can relate to
I think
that.
we can all relate to that.
Yeah. And to keep it simple, you practice those muscles of using your intuition and taking those steps by just doing it and learning from it. And, a question I get a lot is how to not take it so seriously is make it like a game. So, instead of saying, I made this really terrible decision, I can't believe I did that, I just say in my head, haha, oops, let's move on.
Well, I love that. And I think too, I would rather say yes to things and realize later it's like, oh, oops, maybe it should have been a no, rather than constantly saying no and never saying yes. And then have that feeling right later, like, what have I missed out on? Or even with the growth of saying yes to something and not working out like you think, there's like some magical growth in that. But always saying no because of fear or worry or doubt, man, that is heavy. That's definitely not keeping it simple. That's keeping it really heavy.
Yeah. Overcomplicating things. So one of the things that I do for anybody who doesn't know, listening, is I run the operations for Illumination Academy for Kisma Productions. And definitely not anything I've ever been trained to do, that's for sure. But we're dealing with all the back end systems and how all the things run behind the scenes. And it is so easy for those things to get complicated. And my brain loves to complicate things. Like it's
Truth.
I know. Because sometimes it does need to be a little bit more complicated than you think because there's moving pieces that you can't see. But more often than not, it's like it's been such a practice for me of learning how to simplify things. Well, what's really necessary here? How can we pare this down and keep it as simple and direct as possible? It's been, just for me, like it's been such a journey to work through those things and learn where my brain likes to overcomplicate things and where I can be much more simple.
So
and
what
direct.
do you do when you find that you're overcomplicating? How do you pivot out of it?
I usually get frustrated first. I get a little bit frustrated with it and like, I get a little bit of that feeling, and I have to take a break.
Break is good.
First and foremost is I got to step away from it, because usually it's getting too overcomplicated because my head's way too far in it and I'm overthinking every little thing. So stepping back from it, getting out, breaking up the energy, you could say, which in practical terms, skeptic is just going for a walk or doing an exercise or doing something like that, so that you can come back to it with fresh eyes and then start to look at, all right, let's imagine that this was more simple than I could have ever thought. What needs to go and how else, what other options are available here? So, right, I'm being skeptical of the complicated thing that I've created and being open to a much more simple solution. You have to flip it on its head in order to find things that you can pare away or other ways that you hadn't imagined.
Yeah, for sure. I think
Thank you all for being patient with my complexities.
Oh, we love it. I think to give another example of how to simplify it is by worrying about all the background stuff and all the things that could go wrong or whatever, that, you know, it takes up a lot of time. We were talking about that on the ashram call, is even just taking the worry out of it gives you more time.
100%.
Yeah. And for, you know, some practical examples of that, I think letting yourself make mistakes and owning the mistakes takes out a huge chunk of time.
Yes.
And again, another thing I learned from Kevin is if you messed up, you had to say right away, I messed up. This is how I messed up. And he said, it's okay to mess up as long as you acknowledge it. And then to follow that up, what can you do to not make that mistake again? What needs to happen? And that was like, honestly, the very first time that somebody told me that it was really, really okay to make mistakes. And that, I think, is part of how you keep it simple, is by not worrying about all those mistakes. It just takes out layers and layers of clutter in your brain. And it's just, I'm going to make this decision based on my intentions, like Kizma said.
And the best information I have.
I think this is amazing. So again, back to the whole idea of manifesting, creating what you want, your reality. Where people get sticky, where they slow down, where they make it hard is worry, worry, worry. What if it doesn't happen? What if I mess up? What if I invest this money? Or and all of those things like we look at, but this is really key, Jenny. It's like, okay, I made a mistake, next. Like there's not a lot of charge to it. And so when we look at where we put a lot of charge of emotion or feeling onto something and then hang on to it, and it then holds us back, makes it heavier, harder, instead of just like next. That is a very objective way of being, which again, Kevin was extremely objective, but it's also allowing for a very simple A to B line and a very clear way to manifest what you want. It's like, okay, that section didn't quite work out. Let's try it again. Like cut, right? Just on the movie set, cut, next, and go.
Right. Yeah. In our business, when we put something out, like we do our best to make sure that everything's going to work right. But many times if I'm building something in a new system, I don't always know, until you turn it on and, people start clicking the things that we know, like, okay, everything's working the way it's supposed to be. You have to have that permission. So what I hear from this, which I was kind of saying without saying, and Jenna definitely was saying, is that the perfectionism. Talk about perfectionism is like the recipe for making it hard, and giving yourself permission to make mistakes, and even encouraging yourself to make a few mistakes just to get a little bit messy. Like artistically, I think that's, for me, that's something that's really important.
Right.
If I want to make some new music or something like, or record something new, starting and getting super perfectiony about the whole thing. Just talk about a killjoy. It just sucks all the fun in life out of it.
For sure. I remember my mom telling me, I was always an A student, and just because like my parents never checked my homework, or unless I was like crying about pre-calculus or whatever, but they,
oh my God, it was so hard.
They I kind of just did my thing, and I wanted to get good grades. I liked learning and all of that. And my mom said that like the very first time I like failed an assignment, didn't get an A, she was happy because I was like, oh, well, like the perfectionist streak is over. So, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
License to be free.
So I always think of that story where she was like, you always hear the opposite of like, your parents are hunting or whatever. She was like, oh, thank God you failed.
Yeah.
I think it's so true. And so what I would ask our listeners out there, and thank you for joining us, because this manifesting topic, we hear the word manifesting thrown around so much. You know how I feel about, we're always shaping our reality. We're part of this cosmos. Our thoughts, our things, our energies make the thoughts even more strong. And of course, we're on this planet with billions of other people. but we have our personal universe that we can be responsible for and make it the lightest and brightest. So one of the things to maintain the simplicity and ease of, whether you call it manifesting, whether you call it checklist, like we talked about in our last episode, and just getting stuff done, is if you expect it to be exactly the way you want it, it's going to be hard.
Over exacting.
And that perfectionism, because there's going to be an internal, like, oh my gosh, what if it doesn't? And then this fear of disappointment. I encounter that all the time with people. So we have to let that go and understand that there is this wonderful possibility that shows up that could be, if I were going to get woo, I would say perhaps the universe has an even better plan for you. Could you just open up to that possibility? Mm-hmm. Or perhaps you're just going to land in a place you never thought possible. But if you keep worrying about it being exactly as you want, it won't be fun and it will be hard, I think.
I totally agree. And I was a former denier when somebody would say, oh, well, it's going to work out when you least expect it. I swear was about to slap them across the face. And
that is so frustrating to hear.
It is. And I think because it's, to say the opposite, it's an oversimplification is, it's going to work out when you least expect it, but you're working so hard and overcomplicating. And that's why you're over expecting, you're over potentializing it.
Yeah.
And that's why you get, well, at least why I would get upset when people say that is because, well, I want it now. I am expecting it. So let's get this going. And on the flip side, what I have learned from that phrase is to, first of all, not say that to anybody, and to say instead, what if it works out in a way I never expected, which, something we touched on in part 1 is, instead of saying, well, when you least expect it, well, what if there's something else that I'm not expecting that's going to happen?
Yeah.
I think that's a really great way to look at it.
Yeah. You're referring to one of my favorite teachers, Vadim Zayland. We're pretty sure is a real person.
Yeah, he's real.
I'm pretty sure
He's real.
But he talks about.
He just hasn't called us.
Not
He doesn't
yet.
return my calls.
Not yet.
Maybe he'll hear this and
Send it over.
But talking about over potentializing, right, and getting back to our conversation from the previous episode about energy, right, is you think about all that excess energy that people build up around things, and then it becomes so important.
Right.
And they become so invested in that goal or that thing coming into being or coming into their life. It's like you think about all the extra pressure that puts on you. Talk about making things hard on yourself, because all of a sudden your identity is invested in it, and it tells a very specific story about you, whether or not you get that, or whether or not you get that now, or it takes you a long time, or whatever it is. It all of that is feeding back on itself with this huge amount of excess energy that you have to deal with. Talk about making things hard, right? So they say when you least expect it. Well, what that means really, it's frustrating to hear, especially if you're not thinking this way. But what that really means is when I take away all that extra energy and importance, then I'm available for something to show up in my life that I hadn't even thought, or that I couldn't even see.
Yeah.
And that is not making it hard. That's being available.
Yeah. But what are you doing? You're taking away all the extraneous stuff that isn't all that important and letting that simple, direct, clear way show up for you. Yeah.
Super good. I love that so much. Jenna, with some of the people that you talk to, because you're sort of in and out of the woo world, where do you see that people in both elements, both realms, I should say, make things hard?
Definitely the doubt. And a lot of times the doubt comes from internally. You're doubting yourself. And a lot of times we take on the naysayers, the opposite of the, oh, it's going to work out people. They start listing all the reasons why it's not going to work out. And, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. Why are you doing that? This isn't going to work. It hasn't worked out. And if they're...
Aren't you worried?
Yeah.
That's
Like,
always a good one.
should I be?
Yeah.
I say that often. I'm like, should I be? And it's really easy to take on those things if you're not 100% certain, like we talked about. And if you also secretly or not so secretly have those same doubts, you are just almost looking for the validation.
That is really true.
Yeah. You're looking for reasons it's not going to work out.
You're looking for someone else to talk you out of it.
Right.
So you can give up on your dream or whatever.
Yeah, that's good. That's true. Yeah.
And whether you realize that or not, and that's where all of the sciencey woo, all that stuff comes in, is that it's, especially if you are not aware, we talk about awareness all the time. If you're not aware, it's really, really easy to get lost in that. And I think, the doubt is just, it can pull you down if you're not certain.
Yeah. And I want to add on to that, everyone. It's like Jenna, you said, there might be somebody saying, aren't you worried? Why this? Like the naysayers. Be really careful what you're listening to and watching, because news is filled with fear and doubt. Are we going to be okay? Is the economy? I mean, this is being fed into us. And if you listen to it without a very strong awareness of, let's just take the two main news stations of like CNN and Fox News, they're two main sales stations trying to get you to listen to them and take their side. If you're not present to what's behind that force, it's very easy for that, and I'm going to use the word energy or words or whatever, to get into your system.
Yeah.
So we have to be really, really careful how we know what's going on in the world and how the information dissemination and also the people around us, if we're sharing things with people that are naysayers, they're going to do what they do, which is put on doubt. That's going to make manifesting harder, whatever it is. So you might want to keep your dreams close. You might want to make sure that you have a friend or a community like we have where you can share things and they're actually lifted up and supported, and get true and aligned with your own, I would say, thought process and your own heart. Is this really something you want? And are you ready to leap over those stones of doubt that are in the path? Like, are you really ready to just leap over them and let them go? Because that's what makes things way more simple.
Yeah. And getting back to our skepticism conversation on that, you talked about the one side or the other, like this side's trying to get you to believe that, and that side's sometimes people think their skepticism is about like doubting everything, and it's not necessarily about that as much as it is about, I wonder what the whole story is.
Right.
Yes.
What more is there to this that maybe they're not saying or that we're just not aware of?
Right.
And that kind of narrow-minded skepticism is a way to make things really hard for yourself. And I just think that's important to think about, to be able to see a greater picture, just like you were saying, Kisma.
Right.
Yeah. And getting humble for sure on, admitting actually that you may not have all the information, you may not know, and still being okay moving forward. And then, the doubters are going to doubt. And I know I hear a lot of people say, I want the doubters to see why this is going to work. And you can't really attach yourself to that because, it's not your responsibility to, make the doubters understand. And something else that we talk about is letting people be who they are. Like, let them be doubters. They're going to say like, aren't you worried? No. Well, why not? Well, I'm not.
Just leave it at that.
And
simple.
then
Close the loop.
Like, let's go get pizza or whatever you want to do. And that I think is when we talk about like being so sure of the thing. That is one of the biggest parts of it, because people do let the doubts in. And that's where I see people in all of the realms get stuck. And we sometimes make it this really big thing. Like, oh, this thing happened to me 20 years ago and it's in my subconscious. And, I've experienced that for sure. But sometimes it is just a really simple thing. Like when Bryson was talking about wanting to have a band and we went to this Green Day show, which I got, last minute tickets for, and his son is playing, and he's like, man, I really want to do that. And so I asked, what's stopping you? And, we got to get to the band together. And, I thought he was going to say like, oh, well, my dad's not a famous rock star or whatever. And he was like, well, really right now, like we don't have a drummer.
That's so funny.
So
simple, right?
Yeah. I was like, okay. And, we start going through the list of like who to call and who to whatever. And then, like a couple of weeks later, I was like, oh, well, how hard can it really be? So I sat down, if you need a drummer, I'm just going to learn how to drum. and I did okay. The neighbors didn't complain. They said it sounded decent, but it was really, really hard.
Hard. Drummers, man.
Harder. It's, it's like learning a new language, and
drummers carry the band, man.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And we know some really good drummers. So, but sometimes it's not this big dramatic thing. Sometimes it's just, we're just missing a piece.
We're just missing a piece. I love that. Nick, with our listeners, share maybe two or three things in your way of thinking where people can stop making it hard.
People can stop making it hard. Well, one, like we talked about, getting out of perfectionism, letting it just be what it is. It's okay. It's okay if you don't have a mission to save the world or to, have this huge grand vision. Like you can just have a vision for your life that is more to your liking by 20%. And that's okay. Like that's a perfect place to start and letting it grow from there. The perfectionism says it has to be this way and it's going to be that way. And that's number one for making it really hard.
Right.
The second thing I would say is, well, let me put it this way. A lot of times I think people can, when I've worked with people, individually through coaching and healing sessions, I think, every once in a while, somebody will get frustrated with me because it's such a simple answer. And their brain seems to reject the simplicity because they've been trained to value complicated things and complicated answers. And so when I come out with something that's just really direct and simple, and they're like, well, surely there must be something more than that.
Nope.
Is that it? How can it be just that?
Just stop it.
Right. Just stop that. Just stop. Well, why don't you just stop doing it? Have you tried not doing that?
Bob Newhart, everyone.
But then we have to have a conversation that paints the way from complicated to simple, and making it okay to have the simple thing and to just focus on the simple thing rather than making it all about all this other stuff. That is something that a lot of people don't recognize, is that simplicity is a practice, and it's a skill that you develop over time that has to do with letting go of the value of complicated, the fear of missing out, because it's not everything all at once, and just letting yourself focus on, one or a few very simple things.
I love that.
I don't remember how many tips you asked for. Was that okay?
I know that was good. That was a lot. For me, when I think about what complicates things, this is really interesting. I'm curious how many of you out there do this, because I think at some point we all kind of do. It's that, what are people going to say? Not in terms of, I need them to agree, but I'm going to have to manage other people's thoughts or emotions, or quote unquote, deal with people. And it's like you said, Jenna, is like the naysayers or whatever. And it's really important, where we're looking at different things in our life and whatever. Some of you might have family or friends or colleagues, whatever, and you want to consider them, and that's really sweet and good. But at the end of the day, what are you deciding for your life? And just go for it. And I love, like, if people say, well, aren't you worried? Aren't this? No, I'm good. And then change the subject, move forward, like keep your own sparkle on it, because when you do that, you just keep moving forward. It keeps it very simple. The moment that we start to get into, oh my gosh, are they upset or this, or what does my boss think or whatever? You've opened up, you've lost energy and you've lost the intention. And that's when it becomes hard. For me, I think that's like one of the things to really keep a pulse on. And the other thing to keep it light and simple is, well, what if it is possible? Like just, because how often are we hearing, well, maybe it isn't possible, or like we said, somebody puts energy or thoughts on it. Well, what if it is possible that this could all work out really easily and we could have a lot of fun doing it?
Yeah.
Of all the people that we've worked with, even in their minds, they have goals and they think that, I don't know if that's possible or anything like that. I could easily count on one hand the number of times I've heard goals that are like so outlandish that it's like, all right, well, we might need another 20 years on your life or 30 years on your life.
We never hear that.
For that one. But I almost never does that happen. Like overwhelmingly, it's like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you,
Completely
Jenna?
possible.
What's some other tips?
That's a really great point. And I love everyone in the ashram and all of our groups. And I'm not just saying that. I really do. And that's why I'm here. And I can see it for everyone so simply. And it's like, well, obviously you're going to do that. Obviously you can't do that. And, we all get stuck in our own little worlds when, the opposite of the naysayers, like the Nicks and Kismas are, well, yeah, obviously you can do it. What's the next step? And I think kind of figuring out who those people are in your life, in your corner, will simplify everything for you.
Yeah. And just to clarify on that as we wrap this up is like, hey, there's going to be naysayers. You don't have to just cut those people out of your life. You just don't have to listen to them.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay it any heed. You can just let them say what they're going to say.
Yeah.
And just
stay in your own lane.
Oh, great. Cut your cords and move on.
Right. And, this could be a whole topic, so I won't go too much into it, but just like, it's okay to be a little selfish, because what we think as selfish a lot is just like being yourself,
just being yourself and doing what you want,
and doing it. And and I think there's probably people that need to hear that. Like, it's okay to just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's the simplest way I can put it.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. And remember, who you're around matters. So if you're interested in joining Illumination Academy in some way, shape, or form, and being around people like Nick, myself, and Jenna that can see the vision for you and hold the possibility, please do email us at
hello@illuminationpodcast.com
and share this episode with skeptics, woo people, anybody that you think might need to keep their manifestations simple. We'll see you next time. Much love and namaste.